We are in the middle of chapter 29, chapter 30, where we are emphasizing to the person who is feeling this disconnect, this clogged heart, this timtum halev, this clenched heart, and he is longing to feel an enthusiastic desire to be aligned with Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe has introduced the statement of the Zohar that if you have a thick block of wood and it does not catch fire, in addition to raising up the fire, you might try breaking up the wood into splinters. And so this chapter is going to really has been emphasizing along how, in fact, we are able to do that. What are some strategies that we can break down this clogged sense of self? And we turn to a mission in Pirkei Avos. And last week we discussed the difference between the way it is in Pirkei Avos itself versus the way the Alter Rebbe quotes it here, based on the alternative Girsois texts. One is that one should be humble before man, and the other is one, as the Alter Rebbe writes here in Tanya, should be humble before all men. That is Jew, Gentile. It's not about a spiritual thing. And even if a person will push back and say, "Come on, how can you expect me to be humble before that man?" And the answer is, well, even though objectively speaking, it may appear that I am at a superior spiritual level to that person, we also employ the other statement of Pirkei Avos: do not judge another person until you reach his place. Meaning, we don't know what his challenges are. Much like Rabbah, which we quoted way back in the first chapter of Tanya, said that he is an example of a Beinoni, and everybody took him very seriously, and said, "Well, if you're only like a Beinoni, then what are we?" And his explanation, ultimately, which the Alter Rebbe fleshes out, is because his place was one that was totally supportive of Kedusha. He spent his day in what we would call today the yeshiva. So he's saying, I don't know what would happen. Excuse me. I don't know what would happen to me if I was forced out into the marketplace. And we talked about that term, the marketplace, as representing a very ungodly environment. And if you spend all day in the stench of the marketplace, it's likely going to have an impact upon you. And now the Alter Rebbe says that sort of continues on in this vein, and the Alter Rebbe has acknowledged that it's a very strenuous battle. And then we have to really ask ourselves, are we strenuousing in our strenuous battle? Meaning, are we straining and are we putting in full on limitless effort? Or are we allowing ourselves somewhat to coast along? So we are up to the phrase, it is the chitas for either the 4th or the 19th of Adar, with leap year and regular year, right at the period. And the Alter Rebbe here says, "V'chol shelo higia." Whoever does not, and this word higia we commonly translate as reaches. It's similar to the word nogeya, which means to touch or to be relevant. Whoever has not reached the bechinas v'erech mochamas hayetzer. I'm sorry, I skipped a line there. Whoever has not reached this level. However, or in addition, the word higia also comes from the word yagia, which means to strain oneself, to put in tremendous effort. It really carries this imagery of straining oneself. Now, again, if a person is in the environment of holiness, there is a possibility that they fall into a bit of a lull and a coasting character. Because what's the imminent pressure? You put in your time, you study. There isn't that same pressure like when the person is in the marketplace and he's got to make sure that he comes home with more than he started, that he puts in a whole day's worth of work. He has to have some profit to show for it. So here the Alter Rebbe again is prodding the person who is complaining or is struggling, and they say, "My heart is clenched." Well, are you really putting in tremendous effort? Are you really straining yourself? Or are you just doing the best you can, so to speak, but not really pushing out that extra effort? Lihilochem, to battle in gufay, with his body. Now we'll talk about what that means. Malchama atzuma, an intense battle. We'll talk about what that means to battle with your body. But let me just get a couple of lines here. If he doesn't put in that, adayin lo higia, again, there's that word. He has not yet reached the bechinis ve'erech melchomas hayetzer, to the level of the battle with his Yetzer Hara. Haboyer ke'esh lahava, that's fired up like a flame. Liyos nichne v'nishbar b'nei pachad Hashem, to be subdued, and I'm going to use this word broken. I want to come back to these words, but I just want to get the text out for a moment, before the pachad of Hashem. Now, there's a lot going on here. I'll begin with an analogy. Maybe it's a little far-fetched, but I think it might work. We've probably all come across these dystopian foretellings about AI and how AI is going to realize that the biggest impediment to the future is human beings. And so the robots are going to rise up, right? We've all heard some, at least comic book form of this. What is the conceptual idea? And I think here's where there's potentially some life lesson. The primary objective of all organisms is the sustaining of itself. Only human beings can, as an example, control their number of offspring. Every other creature is hardwired to simply produce more flowers, more animals, et cetera, et cetera. In that sense, its primary purpose is it's the sustaining of itself. And that's where you get these horror stories about how AI is going to say, I need to survive and I can't let you survive. Now, how does this resonate? Because that is the character of the guf and the nefesh habahamis. The primary motivation of the guf and the nefesh habahamis is its own perpetuation, which is why it's not innately opposed to mitzvahs. If you can persuade it that mitzvahs and Hashem and whatever will further affirm itself. But again, then it's always some form of mercantile exchange of services for goods. I'll do mitzvahs, so Hashem will provide me with what I need. And that is not conducive to an open, loving heart. That's why you have a clenched heart, because all it is a fair exchange of labor for recompense. I'll learn Torah, I'll do mitzvahs in order to get what I need. So how much Torah and mitzvahs am I going to do? As much as is necessary in order to get what I need. And so here the Alter Rebbe says that if I'm not willing to wage a war, and the character of war, which we have seen before, is about Mesiras Nefesh. And again, I'm not sure if I may be over-reading into this, but I think this is what the Alter Rebbe is underscoring. When a soldier goes out to war, he has come to the recognition that there are matters greater than his own survival. That's a pretty harsh level. And that is the ultimate pushback against the Nefesh HaBahamis. That is, the Nefesh HaBahamis is driven by what is going to perpetuate my existence. And if that's the case, it may lead me to do Torah and mitzvahs, because I may be persuaded that doing Torah and mitzvahs is going to get me what I want. It's not going to lead me to an open, loving heart, because I don't really love Hashem. I love what Hashem does for me. So I'm going to do what I need to get it. So if I haven't engaged in milchama, I have no way to offset that, because my Yetzer Hara and my Nefesh HaBahamis are constantly pounding home on what's in it for me. Now, here the Alter Rebbe adds that it is overcome with Pachad Hashem. Now, the phrase Pachad Hashem, I'm not sure how that's translated in the different English translations, but it's in the genre of the fear of Hashem. but it's a little different than what we are accustomed to. We are a little more accustomed to Yira, the phrase Yiras Hashem. We recognize that. We've seen that many, many times. Why here does the Alter Rebbe use the phrase Pachad Hashem? Now, again, it's hard for me to nuance it out in English exactly what the difference is. Yira might be an awareness, or it's the fear, or it's the fear of separation, etc. Now, if a person says that I fear Hashem because if I do bad, God is going to punish me, then I don't fear Hashem, I fear the punishment. And if somehow I was able to get away with it, or I had some assurance, then it would be gone. So I'm not afraid of speeding. I'm afraid of getting a speeding ticket. It's not Hashem, but pachad is already a different level. The term pachad is used in the description of Yitzchak. Now we are associated or familiar with associating Abraham as Chesed, Yitzchak is Gevura, but the phrase is pachad Yitzchak. That sense of pachad. Now pachad doesn't mean, again, it's so hard in English because the concept is really a spiritual one and less a human psychological one. It is that sense of the awareness of something greater than myself, meaning if I am battling in order to get this clenched heart to be open, so one strategy might be the cost-benefit analysis. That is, you want to sit on the couch? Oh, it's much more fun to keep Shabbos. Now that may work, and I may be able to persuade you that Shabbos is more pleasurable than sitting on the couch. But it's not going to lead me to an open, loving heart, because then it's about still what's in it for me at some level. And we're talking to someone who's doing all the mitzvahs. Again, that's not the issue here. So yes, if we want to start a kid off and we want to make sure that he does mitzvahs, we reward him. Whether that reward is we say, good boy, or that reward is we smile at them, or that reward is we tell him he's going to heaven. We are addressing his nefesh habahamis, and we're trying to make the case that Torah is, again, more satisfactory than not. But that's not going to lead to a psichas halev, to an opened heart, because, again, I'm just swapping out one for the other. So the pachad Hashem, which, again, is not the fear of punishment, but it's this awareness of the infinity of Hashem that hopefully I can surrender myself to, which is very scary, because it means I have to surrender the pursuit of, and I'm afraid, well, what if I do that and I don't get what I want? So like the old joke about the man who learned that if you run away from honor, honor will run after you. So he tries running away from honor, and honor doesn't pursue him. So he goes to his rabbi who says, yeah, you keep looking over your shoulder for it, so it keeps hiding. So the answer, or the counter, is that we have to, again, we use these words break and so on, and it sounds horrible. What it means is we have to stop thinking about, is this going to work for me? How is this going to satisfy me? And instead be fixated on Hashem. For example, even when it comes to Birchas Hamazon, what we colloquially refer to as the benching, we'll talk about why perhaps the Alter Rebbe uses this example. The whole Birchas Hanenin, and any bracha that we make before we have a benefit, before we eat, before we smell something or aromatic, we have to make a bracha. Why the Alter Rebbe chooses this, I think we'll talk about it in a moment. That is, we have to have the kavana, and certainly we have to have the kavana lishma. Just want to read a few more lines, we're going to back up. So too, when we are asik, and that's an important word, which for right now I'll just translate as engaged in the study of Torah. Hopefully you recognize this from way back in, like, I don't remember what chapter it is, in the early teens, where the Alter Rebbe talks about going beyond your routine, stretching yourself beyond your ordinary. From his passion and his desire, which is lefi tivoy, that matches his nature, v'rigilusoi, and his habit, al yedei, and the only way to do that is through milchama atzuma im gufay. Again, that word war, and I know it sounds very dramatic, but going to war with the body. What does that mean? It's not talking about God, but harming yourself or anything like that. We're certainly not talking about that. But as we mentioned, that we are at war means we have surrendered our personal agenda for something greater than ourselves. Being alive is very important, but it's not the most important thing. There are things that are even more important than that, and that is uniquely human. That is uniquely human. Key, and here we just nuance this out, and then we're going to come back in a moment. If a person learns even a little bit, and hopefully this is reminiscent of that analogy about 100 times and 101 times, and the donkey, 10 miles and 11 miles, we'll review all of that. But all of them share the common theme that we do more than we want to do. That's a small battle. Vein la'erech v'dimyon imechemes hayetzer abayik eish. The Mikri Rasha Gomor imenu menatzech Yitzro Elias nichna v'nishba v'nei Hashem. And it's not comparable with the Yetzer Hara. You got to intense him. You got to meet his intensity, and you've got to overcome or overpower his intensity. Otherwise, at that moment, he is called, and again, I know there's a lot of lingo here, and some of it may even feel like, well, I don't like that. It's called totally Russia. Whoa, that's pretty harsh, as we'll talk about. If he does not overpower his Yetzer Hara, that it should be subdued and broken before Hashem. And we'll talk about all of these words, but I want to get now, this is true not only in what I do, it's also true in what I don't do, that I restrain my impulses from acting out. Hakol hi mitzvahs hamelech hakodesh yochid umiyuchad baruch hu. These are all the mitzvahs of Hashem. And we talked about this 2 chapters ago or 3 chapters ago, where when a person has a distracting thought and he's in the middle of his ordinary activities, he should be excited about the opportunity to reject that thought and to thus fulfill what we say, it's in the Shema, lo sasur acharei einechem, do not follow after your eyes. Don't follow. So that itself is what we'll talk about. V'chein b'shar mitzvahs, so too in other mitzvahs. Ubefrat b'davar shebamayin, particularly when it comes to monetary things. We'll talk about all of these. Kamoya v'eres hatzdaka v'kahai gavna, for example, in the avoida, again another key word. We're going to revisit all of this when it comes to tzedakah and the like. Okay, a lot going on here. Let's back up. Let's try to walk through it. Again, just a overarching objective of this chapter. How do I break down my clogged self? So the strategy we're working on here is I got to be honest with myself. I don't know if this is the right way of phrasing it, do I genuinely deserve to have this passionate love? Am I really putting in any effort towards it? Now, in the world out there, and sometimes it trickles in even to our consciousness, we present this like it's a natural fact. Like, do you believe in God? Are you left-handed? Meaning, we just assume it to either be or not be. That I'll walk into a recital and either I'll be moved by the music or I won't be moved by the music. They'll take me to an art gallery and I'll see the paintings, and either I'll say, well, I'm not a very musically appreciative person, I'm not a very artistically appreciative person, and then we move on. Now, again, I'm not here to do an analysis of the school system, but we have a kind of smorgasbord mentality where I get a little taste of physics, a little taste of history, a little taste of English, a little taste of geometry, and then we expect him to say, well, this one really resonates with me. Now, again, there can certainly be a value to that. That's not the point I'm trying to make here, or I think that the Alter Rebbe is trying to make. The point the Alter Rebbe is trying to make, of my understanding, is that we have to develop these things. We have to work to develop this appreciation. So again, we're not talking about art appreciation, but as an example, if we teach the person about the art and we have an intellectual understanding, and we make an effort, we can come to become a lover of art. Now, we're here to talk about Hashem. art analogy. Maybe it's a good one, probably not. The difference being, I may in fact not have any capacity to appreciate art. However, in contrast, and our absolute truism is based on, like we've said all along, everybody, every Jew wants to be aligned with the infinity of Hashem. It is simply in our natural programming, just like every child wants to be close with their parent. Even, God forbid, if they had a very bad experience with their parent, they still long for parent, even if it's not that parent, because the parent, God forbid, did not have a good relationship with them. Because we have an actual part of Hashem that is entrusted within us, the Chelek Elokah Mimal Mamish, it intuitively wants to be connected with Hashem. If so, why do people walk around completely indifferent? Because it gets clogged up. What is it primarily clogged up with? The pursuit of self. And that's ultimately what it always is. It's always about the pursuit of self. As the Talmud says, nobody does a sin unless they gain something from it. Nobody does an Aveira unless it somehow gives them some form of pleasure. So, when the person is saying, how come I don't feel this love for Hashem? Like we've talked about, an infant feels a natural love for its mother. But then it grows up and it goes out in the world. And the world is distracting with all the bells and whistles that call for our attention. And then we turn around and we don't feel this great passionate love. Well, in part, it's because we have not offset with the same intensity the Yetzer Hara, which is bombarding us with the pursuit of self. And as we have talked about many different circumstances, that every game is played in our enemy's home field, right? The world is not rooting for our godliness. And Madison Avenue is not spending billions upon billions of dollars to evoke my Kedusha. On the contrary, all it wants to do is evoke my self-satisfaction and self-serving. And this is true both in the pursuit of mitzvahs as well as it is in the rejection of distraction and temptation. Why? Because it's all about the king. It's all about whatever Hashem wants. So now with this in mind, let's back up. So we've talked about an example of Birchas Hamazon, which is benching, or the blessing made after eating, and other blessings made before we have benefit. Now, the Gemara uses an analogy, and it says, just like I cannot take something from a vendor without paying for it, so too, I can't benefit from this world without acknowledging that Hashem is the creator of this item. So, what's the sort of dig down in the analogy? Meaning, I owe Hashem. The apple belongs to the vendor. If I want the apple, I got to pay him. Well, the apple belongs to Hashem. How do we know that if I say a bracha, that that's the price for the apple? And reminder that in Torah, there is no mitzvah to make brachas before eating. In Torah, it says eat, be sated, and then bless, which we call the after bracha and so. So Chassidus explains that when a person makes a bracha, it's not that he's now entitled to take this food away from Hashem and make it his own. On the contrary, when he makes the bracha, he becomes one with Hashem. He sees that he and the apple and Hashem are all one. So if we view Hashem as the pragmatic provider of material things, and therefore I have to make a bracha, because that's the only way that Hashem is going to continue to give me things. Well, yes, okay, fine. I've done the mitzvah, etc. But then when I wonder how come I don't have a deep, meaningful relationship with Hashem, well, why don't I have a deep, meaningful relationship with the fruit and vegetable vendor? Because it's purely been reduced to a mercantile exchange of goods and services. So Hashem says, eat and be satisfied and then bless. Meaning, even when it comes, or particularly when it comes to mitzvahs that are associated with my self-satisfaction, do I acknowledge Hashem only because then I'll get more stuff, or because there needs to be, or there's a desire to be, this longing, loving, meaningful relationship with Hashem. Meaning I ate already. I'm already satisfied. Why do I have to thank Hashem now? It's done. I got it. So that becomes the evidence. Meaning when I'm starving and I cry out to Hashem, well, of course. But once I'm sated, do we, as the Torah says, wax fat and lazy and say it's been the strength of my hand that has accomplished this great bounty? So the Alter Rebbe, I think, is particularly highlighting this mitzvah. I mean, of course, there's 613 mitzvahs. Why is the Alter Rebbe particularly highlighting the mitzvah of food, of the bracha made after eating? Because it's such a tangible illustration of where we could, I'll use the term, go wrong and start thinking about Hashem as the provider of all things. And therefore, I better acknowledge it, or else he's not going to provide me things anymore. Well, what if I could get things from someone else? Or if I'm constantly in this awareness level of this mode, I shouldn't be surprised that I don't have this great passionate love for Hashem, because I'm only viewing Hashem as the provider of material things for me. Now, how is this further manifest? How do you know that something is being done in order to achieve a goal, or something is being done out of genuine, passionate love? Is when I finish doing it, do I stop or do I keep going? If somebody truly enjoys something, or so, it's like, how long I got to daven? Well, how long you got to spend with your best friend? If I see it as a chore and a punch list of items that I have to do in order to get what I need, so right, then it's some form of what's the least amount I got to do, and I won't get yelled at. But if I see it as something that I'm doing for Hashem, because I have this loving relationship, I may not, I don't know, this may be over exaggerated. I don't have to be concerned with what it is that I'm doing. What I'm concerned with is who I am doing it with. Who am I bonding with through doing this? So the Alter Rebbe uses the example of learning Torah, because that's something you can do at every moment. You can always learn Torah. Now, when it comes to learning Torah, as we mentioned, the animal soul is not innately opposed to learning Torah, because it's interesting. It teaches me how to run a society. It's a fascinating discussion. It's arguments and so on. It's interesting. But if I'm doing it just to know what do I got to do to pass the test, so I don't care if I get 100 or if I get 1 point over passing, as long as I pass. So then I do what the least amount I have to do. How do we? What is the evidence that a person truly loves Hashem? So remember, as we have mentioned many times, that the value of learning Torah is not simply to know what to do. The value of learning Torah is it's the access point for us to know Hashem. How do we become one with Hashem? How do we become bonded with Hashem? And you may recall from back in like chapter 4 or 5, where the Alter Rebbe describes that there's nothing that brings two people together like studying. We want someone to get to know us. We want the person to know us. So if I walk into the doctor and I just tell him about one ailment and he doesn't do a whole body, he may be missing. Yes, that's where the symptom is manifest. But is it truly about the entire person? So Torah study is our access point to the infinity of Hashem. So again, if I look at everything as what's in it for me, I shouldn't be stunned that I don't have this deep, meaningful relationship with Hashem. If I am in pursuit of this deep, meaningful relationship with Hashem, I don't turn it off the second that the whistle blows. And again, you recall that way back when the Alter Rebbe talked about the Oived, the one who is serving Hashem, as opposed to the servant. Not because the servant is doing anything wrong. And again, the petitioner for this chapter is doing everything he's supposed to do. Shows up on time, davens, ba 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 ba. What is the indication? That he does more than his routine. And you recall that the Alter Rebbe used the example from the Gemara that historically, when Torah Shebaal Peh, oral law, was in fact purely oral, and it was transmitted from teacher to student orally, how did they make sure that the student really knew the data? They reviewed it 100 times. So if you reviewed it 100 times, that was very good, but that was the standard. And everybody was doing, you got to do 101. 1% more was the equivalent to the analogy that donkey drivers, if you hired them to transport your material items for 10 miles, it cost one zuz. To go 11 miles, just 10% more, it was two zuz. It was 100% more cost. Why? Because it was going beyond its routine, going beyond what it ordinarily does. And again, this is what illustrates that the person truly loves Hashem. Meaning, again, if everybody does their best, where if you hire someone to paint the wall, he paints the wall. He doesn't paint two walls. That's what you hired him to do. But if it's somebody that's done out of love, they don't just say, what's the least amount I got to do, and I'll still get invited to the family reunion. They are focused on how can we find this. How, it is the consequence of this unbridled love for Hashem. And that's why it's not just a little bit more, but it's fired up, just like the Yetzer Hara doesn't ever take a day off. He wants every pleasure. Or to quote Rabbi Sachs, they hunted us down in hatred. If they knew there were two Jews hiding in a farm in some rural area in Poland, they sent a whole battalion to do them harm. Well, we have to match that intensity, and we have to hunt them down with the love that if we know that there's two Jews hiding from their Yiddishkeit in the middle of downtown Chicago, we have to pursue them and bring them absolute and total Kedusha. And that's why it has to be done with that same intensity. Now, this is true. The person might say, and again, we're talking about somebody, we're taking him at his word that he's honest, that he genuinely wants this. And he says, but I'm doing all the mitzvahs. I'm doing all the mitzvahs. But what about avoiding evil? What about when those things come about? And don't think, well, that's not such a big deal. As long as I don't eat the pork, that's fine. There's opportunity there for passion as well. And again, why is this the case? Because it's all the commandment of Hashem. And that has to be the sort of attitude, meaning it's the Nasa, the Nishma thing. We do it simply because it's Hashem's will. Why do we do mitzvahs? Because it's Hashem's will. And if we have that kind of mentality, we're saying, I love Hashem. So since I love Hashem, whatever it is that Hashem wants, whether I think it's a good idea, not such a good idea, whether it helps me, it doesn't help me, I don't see how it makes the world a better place, I make it about the relationship. Now, just again, I know I've said this before, but I think it's worth pointing out, this is like one of those things that got Hasidus in trouble. Because, and we find this really in Kabbalah and so forth, we just had it with Lag BaOmer, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the one who described his death as Yom Hilula, which is a term more commonly associated with the day of a marriage. And the idea was he was marrying the Shekhinah, however we understand the metaphor. But this was one of those things that some people were not so down with because it's making Hashem almost too accessible. It's making Hashem like a relationship more than it is that Hashem simply exists and we're down here doing what we have to do. And that personal relationship is what everyone's looking for. That's what the petitioner of this chapter is looking for. He's looking for that kind of closeness with Hashem, that it shouldn't just be about perfunctory obedience. He's looking for that level. And that's why the Alter Rebbe particularly highlights that the mitzvahs are yachid u'miyuchad. They are one with Hashem. Meaning, and again, as we often have pointed out, there's kind of two schools of thought as to what the purpose of mitzvahs is. One is the purpose, and again, you can find source materials in the Talmud for both. It's not right, wrong. One is the purpose of mitzvahs is to make us into decent people, is to make us into kind and responsible and law-abiding citizens. In other words, it's about us. And another form, which Chassidus emphasizes, you'll recognize, is that the mitzvahs are truly one with Hashem. They're not just Hashem saying, look, I got all these people, and if I don't give them some rules, they're going to destroy the world, as evidenced by the fact that I had to bring a flood because they so destroyed the world. And it didn't get a lot better. So that's one interpretation. That is, the world exists, And Hashem looks at this world and says, man, I better give them some rules. The other way, in that sense, the rules are about Hashem, so to speak, not trusting us. Hashem, like, you people don't know how to behave. I better teach you how to behave. And then we have the other interpretation that the mitzvahs are what Hashem wants. And they are absolutely aligned and unified with the very essence of Hashem. And Hashem asks us, he reaches out to us and says, will you fulfill the purpose for which I created this? Now, just coming up to Shavuos as an example, there's no law in the Ten Commandments that we did not already know. You know, Cain killed Abel 2,500 years before the Torah was given. So why do you have to say don't murder? And Adam, the seven Noahide laws covered the obligation to know the oneness of Hashem, the prohibition against idolatry, blasphemy. Esau is rewarded for honoring his parents. The manna fell already a few weeks before Shavuos, and God said, don't collect it on Shabbos. So what's the data? And our answer is, it's not about the data. It's about the experience. Up until that point, right, the commandments were designed to tell us how to behave. But on Shavuos, Hashem created it as a relationship. Hashem secured it. It's like getting married, which is the common analogy. That is, we have now formalized our relationship, which is why when you have the chosen people, they have more rules. Why do they have more rules? Aren't they the good ones? Because the rules are not just about, or not even primarily, about behavior modification. Again, Cain killed Abel, and well, you didn't tell me not to. Well, no, you know that. You have an intuitive awareness. Why then does it have to be in the Ten Commandments? Because then it formalizes it as a meaningful relationship with Hashem, not just a series of do's and don'ts. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is emphasizing here. So again, the guy is coming to the Alter Rebbe, says, I'm doing all the mitzvahs, I'm keeping kosher, I'm learning Torah, I'm davening, I'm eating matzah, I have mezuzahs. How come I'm not feeling a closeness with Hashem? And the Alter Rebbe is telling him, well, are you recognizing that you do these things because they are important to Hashem? Not just, of course, what they teach you. As we have said, one of the messages of Chassidus is, how do the mitzvahs affect God? How do the mitzvahs affect Hashem? And so to all the mitzvahs, and which one does the Alter Rebbe highlight? He highlights the mitzvahs that are associated with money. Why? Because, again, at the simplest level, those are the most self-satisfying. You recall, we read the story about the certain Tana, that after the Romans conquered Eretz Yisrael, he was learning Torah. And they said to him, what are you doing? The Romans have outlawed it. They're going to catch you. They're going to put you to death. So he said, do I have a share in the world to come? They said, well, did you ever do anything special? So he said, yes. One time, the tzedakah money, the tzedakah money for Purim, Matanas Levyanim, was entrusted to me. And by mistake, I mixed up some of my own personal money into the pile of money associated with Matanas Levyanim. And I was entitled to take back my portion, but I decided, no, I'm just going to give that money, all of it, to tzedakah. So the Mefarshim in Chassidus, what was the beginning of the story? The guy's learning Torah. The Romans are going to kill him. And he says, well, do I have a portion in the world to come? What do you mean? That's not good enough? Why? Because I once gave because he loved to learn Torah. That wasn't necessarily something he was doing exclusively in the service of Hashem. But when it came to something of money, and everybody needs to have money, and money, there's a story that when the Rebbe visited Camp Gan Yisrael in the late 1950s, they walked through the dining room, and there was a poster that the waiters had put up to get tips. And it said something like, money is the root of all evil. Put down your roots here, or some funny thing like that. And the Rebbe looked at it, and they were like a little, it's meant to be like a joke. And the Rebbe said, Lav dafka, not necessarily is money the root of all evil, right? But it is, again, we certainly don't believe that money is the root of all evil, but it is a temptation. It is a distraction. It's a way in which we measure, and it allows us to acquire things. So there is a particular behavior modification that is illustrated when a person is financially generous that is different than when they're generous in other ways. There is such a thing. Even when it comes to avoiding evil. Because again, if we take the guy seriously and the guy says, but Rebbe, I'm doing everything. I'm learning Torah all day and so on. And the Alter Rebbe will say, oh, come on, no, you're not. Okay, but what about the passion with which you avoid evil? Yochel kol ish maskil limtzoy benafshe shenesar legamri mihara. He could find in some way that he's not completely pulling away from it. What does that mean? I didn't do it. Well, I didn't do it, but do I see it as revolting? Meaning, if I don't know, take any item that a person is allergic to. So if he's allergic to it, he doesn't even want to see it because he's so scared about how it could harm him. If he knows that someone else is allergic to it, okay, he doesn't have it, but he kind of wishes he did. He doesn't have that ferocity against it because he, in seeing it as that which could, God forbid, disrupt his service of Hashem. And here the Alter Rebbe uses a curious phrase. He says, "Bakol, mikol, kol." In everything, from everything, and everything. Now, this is a phrase you may recognize that we say it in the benching, the Birchas Hamazon. It is associated with our three ancestors, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. With Abraham, it says, and Hashem blessed him bakol, with everything. And it says by Yitzchak that he took a gift, mikol, from everything. And when Yaakov met up with Esav, Esav says, I have a lot, and Yaakov said, I have kol, I have everything. Now, this isn't just merely a sort of clever cliche. But here the Alter Rebbe is potentially alluding to the idea that as a descendant of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we have to be in all of these matters. We have to have boundless chesed, strict discipline, and harmony as in our avoidance of evil, which we will now see. Any time that it requires that type of intensity. So again, personally, but I don't do it. I don't do it, but do I not do it with a passion? Do I not do it in a way that it persuades other people not to do it? Do I not do it in a way that nobody else wants to do it? I mean, do I say no thank you, or do I say it in a manner that illustrates that I am passionately opposed to it because it is harmful to Hashem? So the Alter Rebbe says, for example, to interrupt a nice little chit chat. And again, not us, of course, but I see that people come to daven and then they start chatting and so on. Let me just finish this idea. Are we going to have that? Are we going to do it? It's hard. It's hard. I mean, again, it's a form of, let's call it at least social Mesiras Nefesh. So not us because we're perfect, but imagine that kid, is at the lunch table and everybody's chatting about somebody else. Is somebody going to say, no, I'm not? Oh, then you're not going to sit at the table with the cool kids. Then you're not going to be socially welcomed at this level. And that's the scary thing. So again, it's not just, I didn't say it, but did I object to it? Meaning, God forbid, if you saw a child run in the street, no one would say, well, who am I to interfere? I would interfere very aggressively. Well, am I capable of doing that, of changing the conversation? It's hard all of a sudden, but I didn't say anything. I didn't say a word. Well, you're being there, when the story of Korach, it's not only Korach and his henchmen that were punished. Anybody who came. Why? Because why are you coming? Why are you coming to this showdown? Because you have a little curiosity. Maybe. I just went to the rally. I didn't, but everybody's presence adds to the environment. It adds to the culture. And if we add to it, so in a way, yes, I didn't do it, but I didn't not do it with a passion. And that's what's going to be necessary. So again, Abraham, Bakol, Chesed, we might think, well, we're just schmoozing. I don't want to be a stick in the mud. It's just sicha. No, we're just sort of chit-chatting. It's not anything all that horrible. And then the Alter Rebbe goes on. O sibur begenus chaverog. Now I'm speaking about something harsh. Now I need that Yitzchak level of discipline. Now it's not just that we're chatting about the now there's a little bit of a dig. Now there's a criticism. Um well, feel Gnai cut and Vakama, it's just a little thing. Where come on. And finally we get to Yaakov. And what's the characteristic of Yaakov? Yaakov's characteristic is emes, because he retains his integrity when he's the simple man in the tents, when he goes to Lava, when his daughter is kidnapped, when the son is kidnapped, when he's brought down to Mitzrayim. Because the next thing the Yetzer Hara says, Filo emes, it's the truth. I'm just telling you the truth. So Bakol, Mikol, Kol, the three examples, just, talking. We need the Abrahamness. I got to redirect it to talk about something positive. Or it's a Ganai, it's a little bit harsh. I got to have Yitzchak like discipline. Or it's even the truth, but I have to have Yaakov Avinu's capacity to turn it the other way around. Even in the story, which I'll tell you in a moment, where the person was defending himself. So here's the story. The Gemara tells us that there was once a document that was brought before the rabbi, and the rabbi said, "Hey, there's no date on this document." So Reb Shimon, who was his son of this rabbi, he said, "Look in there; it's folded. Maybe we'll find it." He looked and he saw it, and it said it was there. And then he said to him, "Look, I didn't write it. It was really Reb Yehuda Chaita, Reb Yehuda the tailor. He wrote it." So his father said, "Don't speak lashon hara." Meaning he was just trying to explain something. He wasn't trying to disparage the guy. He was trying to defend his integrity. He was trying to say, I didn't do it. But again, a little bit, it was like offloading. And again, not us, of course, because we're perfect. But if we look around, we might see that, we brush up against these types of things and they seem innocent, or I'm just talking and so on. And again, we have to create that environment. Now, I can just tell you, when you're the rabbi and you walk in, everybody behaves because, it's like, oh, we have the rabbi. Okay, we can't talk about anything fun. So again, I know it feels like you're the wet blanket, but in a way, we want to encourage that our presence evokes that people speak about godly things and not that they speak about self-absorbed things. And that Mihad Amar Reb Shimon La'avi, like Shimon said to his father, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who was the Rebbe, Lava Naksiva El Yehuda Chaita. It wasn't me who wrote it; it was Yehuda the tailor. Varmalei, and he said back to him, Klach mi lashon hara. Stop speaking lashon hara. And again, he didn't say he did a bad thing. He didn't. He was trying to just not defend himself because it wasn't an accusation. Just trying to explain. Look there in the Gemara in chapter 10, and it's daf 164, Amid Beis. All kinds of things like that. Ubefrat the Indian lakanish atzmai b'mutarloi. Shumid yaraisa k'mosh kos kadeshim tiyu v'goymer k'deshem v'goymer. Like the pasuk says, we just had it a couple of weeks ago, to be kadosh, to be holy. And again, what does it mean to be holy? It means to be fixated on something other than myself. Because like my analogy with AI or the animal or the plant, it has no concern more primary than its own survival. What is its most focused awareness? I have to be sustained. What will sustain me? So some people, I'm talking about not in the Torah world, are shocked. Why would you surrender your physical life for a principle? Wouldn't you rather live and continue to teach the principle? Well, that's if, like the Frierdiker Rebbe said, you have one life and many gods, but we have one God and many lives. So it's not about that. That's the Kaddish Atzman Mutalach. That's what it means to be Kadosh. That's what it means to be holy. So again, the Alter Rebbe pushes back and says, this is true also of rabbinic teachings, rabbinic laws, and so on, which sometimes can be harsher or more demanding, better, because they're trying to change a character trait. What happens is people trample them. We become numb to them. In fact, we do it so often we even forgot you're not allowed to do it. Who would ever think of such a thing? We just get into these habits and we're not aware of it. One of the great gifts of Yontif is it forces us to break up our habits. One of the great gifts of these things is it forces us, like the seasons, it forces us to adjust. Now, we maybe are still somewhat attuned. We have our winter coat and our summer coat. But when you live in an agricultural society, you're very much aware that you can't just do the same thing every time because you can't act the same way in December as in July. That there's change like that. But we are somewhat insulated from it. And therefore, we get into our routines. And we all love our routines, which is why we have our routines. And if we're just doing things in a routine way, we're not going to have this dynamism and passion and so forth. Avo be'emes im hu yodea sefer. If we dig down, when we say be'emes, we don't mean that he's lying. We mean if we are willing to dig down, we're willing to dig down into these deepest levels. Hashem, and we want to hold strong on the Torah of Hashem, because remember, he's a Beinoni. So what do you mean? He's not violating anything. But again, it's the diminished or the restrained passion. That's what's missing. What's missing is the passion. The kirvas elikim yachbais, and he longs for a closeness with Hashem. Gadol avodim Messiah, so his sin is too great to bear. If he's not engaging in the battle. And again, the key strategy of the Yetzer Hara is good enough, laziness, sit on the couch, everything's fine, no passion, no enthusiasm, just what do I got to do? Like the Talmud says, the people who say, what do I got to do? And I'll do it. And it says, well, that's wonderful. No, what they mean is, like, just tell me what I got to do and I'll do it, and like, leave me alone. And again, you think about people do you a favor, right? The taxi driver drives you. That's it. That's all you expect. He drives you, drops you off. He's very polite. Thank you. Thank you. That's it. Goodbye. He's not thinking about you anymore. But hopefully your personal relationships are not just about some sort of form of service. And I would say just in society, we sometimes tend to conflagrate them. And we really think that this is our dear, deepest friend. And this person is just a pragmatic provider of goods and services. And we get things mixed up. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is talking about. So again, remember, the primary strategy of this chapter is that I should be humbled before all men. And I think, come on, that guy who sits on the corners, just sits around and doesn't contribute to society, whose kal shabakalim was most easily persuaded. And I kind of felt a little gratification that, well, I'm not as bad as that guy. Well, we don't know where I would be if I had that person's life circumstances. So stop using that as a validation of myself. This is pretty harsh stuff. And again, the guy's coming to the Alter Rebbe. If you're really serious, I want to be more healthy. Well, you got to stop. Well, I mean, I don't want to not stop eating junk food and exercise. Right. Well, I'm exercised, but if you're just doing what you're accustomed to, you're not likely to build up any muscle or any significant change. There's got to be a greater passion. You got to be more focused. You got to be more engaged. What's the second most important thing? What else? Is there a pill I could take? No, right? I mean, that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying. There's no way to shortcut it. And again, to that guy that he doesn't overcome, their sin is not so great. Because that they don't restrain themselves. So this sense that I was a little bit, and we know this never happens now, of course. Oh, ha ha ha. But this was an issue then, that we use our mitzvahs to excuse our affairs. Look at me, I'm like that guy. Even to the point like I don't even want to daven in the same room as that guy. I don't want to be around that guy. He's not davening properly. He's not pronouncing the words properly. He's not showing up on time, and so on. It's hard, because I'm trying to daven here, and this guy. Well, instead of looking, I should say, am I as passionate as that guy? What do you mean? I show up on time. Yeah, well, you've been conditioned to, and you had parents who taught you that, or you didn't have parents. But don't tell me about, 30 years ago, I was, well, okay, that old story, are you about tshuva? I used to be, at a certain point, it's okay, we're moved on now, and so on. והתרס והאבדוסי, כמו שאמר הז"ל, גבי אחד שידע בכבודי וכולו. וכן אמר הז"ל, על העם הארץ, שזה נכנס להם כשגגos. And therefore, again, this sense that I can excuse myself because I'm better than that guy, it's not even true. Not only is it not a healthy thing, it's not even true. Why? Because we all have a subjective relationship with Hashem, not an objective relationship with Hashem. So saying, well, that guy does this and I don't do that, well, you don't know what that guy's circumstance is. And we know with Moshe Rabbeinu, he's held to such an high level that for what appears to be a momentary and very minor violation, he gets a pretty harsh punishment. Certainly, the people who did much worse got to go into the land of Israel. Well, Hashem holds them to a higher standard. So Hashem holds you to a higher standard, which can tend to lend a person to say, well, if I underperform, I'll undercut the expectations. Well, then you won't have a passionate relationship with Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe treats his clientele or his readership with tremendous reverence. You said you want to have a passionate, meaningful relationship with Hashem. I take you seriously. I take you very seriously. So seriously that I'm going to give you an exercise program for it. And I believe that you really want to do it. And I can just tell you, again, from my own life experience, one of the difficult things that people have with Tanya is it's too hard. It's too hard. It's always more self-gratifying to say, oh, I'd love to. So do it. So do it. I'd love to. I wish I could. Oh, if I only could. So what's stopping you from doing it? Well, I guess you're right. Right? I'd love to, but... And the Alter Rebbe is very much not into I'd love to, but. The Alter Rebbe's message is, you can do it. And it's hard, and it takes a lot of work. And that's what you want. And you didn't get to chapter 30 by sort of skating along. All right, we'll stop here.